Hey, it's Josh Jacobs, and Bob Newhart, Robert George Newhart, died earlier today at the age of 94. And as a little kid, I loved watching the Bob Newhart Show, and just the cast of characters he had with him on that groundbreaking sitcom. That was one of the reasons people stayed home on Saturday night to watch TV. In addition to Newhart's show, of course, there was the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which, like the Bob Newhart Show, was an MTM production that Mary herself owned. It also had Carol Burnett, Maude, as well as a couple other shows as well throughout the years on Saturday night. The show ran from 1972 to 1978, and other cast members included Suzanne Pleshette as his wife, Emily. Now, I got to meet Suzanne Pleshette and her husband, Tom Poston, about 22 years ago. So those are the only two Bob Newhart Show cast members I've actually gotten to meet. Now, yeah, Tom Poston was on the Bob Newhart Show every now and then as Bob's college buddy, Cliff the Peeper Murdoch, who Emily couldn't stand. So it's kind of interesting then in real life that Tom Poston and Suzanne Pleshette married each other when her character couldn't stand Tom's character in the show, but that's oftentimes the case in many situations. It's on DVD, and the neat thing about the DVD is you have commentary by Bob himself as well as various cast members, including Suzanne Pleshette. You got Peter Bonners, who is Jerry the dentist, Marshall Wallace, who was Carol, his secretary, even Jack Riley, who played Mr. Carlin. Jack Riley was another cast member I got to meet from that show. Very friendly, completely the opposite of Mr. Carlin. And I met Jack Riley when I was interning for Oldies 93 KCBS FM, and he was doing he was PC Mom, the computer genius from CompUSA, on the commercials that were recorded there that also featured comedian Tom Sharp. What was interesting about Bob Newhart when he was doing the DVD commentary, he talked about one time, if you notice the show, it's a timeless show. It stands up to today because a lot of sitcoms use a lot of current events in their comedy. But Newhart said during one of the commentary DVD, in one of the DVD commentaries, he said, a young actor one time said to him, "Hey, let's do a joke about Gerald Ford tripping." And Newhart said, "Yeah, that's very funny, but in about 10 years, people are going to have a clue what the hell you're talking about." He was absolutely right. I'll give an example. In 1987, there was a first-run episode of Family Ties. It was an episode where Skippy liked a girl, but she liked Alex instead. And so after a couple of advances, Alex finally gave and kissed this beautiful girl. So Skippy ran away, went home, and then they went into Skippy's bedroom. And the first thing you saw was a framed photograph of President Gerald Ford, and the audience was laughing. Now, I was 15 years old at the time, mind you, and I said, "Mom, how come they're making fun of the fact that Skippy has a picture of Gerald Ford in his bedroom?" And my mom said, "Well, because Gerald Ford was known as being a klutz, he tripped a couple times when he was president." So even though I know who Gerald Ford was, my mom had to explain to me why the audience was laughing. So Newhart was spot on with that. And then in 1982, he had his show Newhart. Now, a couple months before that, I saw him and his wife Ginny on Tattletales. During one of the Bob Newhart Show commentaries, Bob talked about how Buddy Hackett introduced him to Virginia Quinn, and he and Ginny were married for over 60 years until Ginny's passing last year at the age of 81. And so I saw him and Ginny on Tattletales. They're about 12 years apart in age because it's like, wow, Ginny looks so much younger, and she was. But 60 years of marriage, you just don't have that happen often in Hollywood. And they had 4 children, including Robert, Tim, Jennifer, and Courtney, and 10 grandchildren. So a couple months after that Tattletales episode, Newhart came on. And in that show, you had Mary Fran playing Bob's wife, TV wife. His character's name was Dick Loudon, and he ran an inn in Vermont, the Stratford Inn, which was in real life about a 200-year-old building when it was first there. And the opening credits were scenes from, well, actually outtakes from On Golden Pond. And it was a great show. It ran for 8 years. It also had Tom Poston as George Utley. However, this time, Tom was on just about every week as the slow handyman. Very, very funny character. Also, he had in season 3, Peter Scolari joined the cast as Michael Harris, and then his girlfriend Stephanie was the housekeeper at the Stratford Inn. Then of course, he had the 3 bumpkins. Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. And this is my other brother Daryl. And then Bob would always go, yeah, I know that. And the show ran for about 8 years. And as I said earlier, the interesting thing was that both the Bob Newhart Show and Newhart were not canceled by the networks. Both of those MTM productions ended. It was their own decision. It was Bob Newhart's own decision. And Newhart had one of the best endings ever in the history of television. It was actually Bob's wife, Ginny's idea. She said, why don't you make it where the whole series was nothing but a dream of Dr. Robert Hartley's? And so it was top secret. Fortunately, back then, you didn't have the internet for people to spill the beans. So it was kept top secret, and the audience just went nuts when Dick Loudon in the final episode, he'd sold the property. His was the only property that was not sold to Japanese developers. Everybody else sold the property, and it became a golf course. And so the Stratford Inn was in the middle of this golf course, and golf balls were always hitting it. So Dick opens the door, just frustrated with everybody during this reunion, and a golf ball hits him in the face. He falls to the ground, and it fades to black, and suddenly the lights fade up again. You see the comforter that's very familiar if you're a fan of the Bob Newhart Show. And there he is. There's Bob Newhart with Suzanne Plachette. And she says, Bob was just a dream. You ate too much Japanese food or whatever. And so Bob said, yeah, I dreamt I was married to a blonde, and there were these bumpkins. And she said, Bob, just go to bed. And then finally at the end, she said, a blonde. And of course, they played the Bob Newhart Show theme at the end from the 70s. About a year later, they had the Bob Newhart Show in 19th anniversary special. And in that, it was Bob telling what happened the next day, the day after the dream. And so all the cast members were there, from Peter Bonners, Bill Daly, I forgot to mention earlier, is Howard Borden. He was there. So was Carol, Mr. Carlin, just about everyone you could think of the main cast members. So at the end of the 2-hour special or 1-hour special, they say, oh, come on, Bob, it was just a dream. Let's go to dinner. And so they opened up the elevator door, but there was not enough room for everybody. But Bob said, you know what, tell you what, I'll just take the next elevator. So he pushes the button, and the next elevator door opens. And on this ladder are 3 repairmen. So you see the 3 repairmen, and then suddenly you hear, ha! The credits, the film freezes like on the original show, some credits roll, and then the film speeds back up again. And then you hear, I'm Larry, this is my brother Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl. And then Bob charges toward the stairwell and goes, Emily! Another genius move as far as just writing was concerned. That show had great writers. Bob Newhart originally started off, of course, as a comedian using a telephone talking to different historical figures in his album, The Button-Down Mind of Bob Newhart. He also had 3 other albums as well, Grammy Award winning. Bob was also able to use his comedy timing on many specials, including the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, which featured his good friend, actually his best friend, Don Rickles. And he said that the first time he met Don Rickles, he was at one of Rickles' shows, and Don said something very insulting to Ginny from the in the audience, and he said we were best friends after that. Of course, Don Rickles, another great comedian, and I don't know how people can take his insults seriously, because he said them in such a goofy way. It's like, this guy does not sound angry. In fact, Don Rickles actually appeared on an episode of Newhart as a comedian like Don Rickles. And Dick was his reluctant sidekick. And he said, now it's time for everybody's favorite part of the show, Pick on Dick. And they had this picture of Newhart frowning, and the audience was chanting to pick on Dick. And finally, Dick gets so fed up. He's like, so you're fat and bald. He's like, gee, Dick, I can't believe you did that to me. So he couldn't take what he gave. But the interesting thing about the Bob Newhart Show, as well as Newhart, is that he never won an Emmy Award. Now, in the 90s, he had 2 short-lived sitcoms. One was called Bob, which ran about a year or 2. And then George and Leo, in which this was the first show where he actually played a dad. And the reason why was because Bob said, you know what, too many TV fathers are made to look like buffoons, and I don't want to contribute to that. That's just degrading to fatherhood, which I really admired. However, on George and Leo, he was a father, but a father of grown children. In 2003, he starred in the Christmas comedy classic, and it really is a comedy classic now, called Elf, where he played Papa Elf, the kind of adopted father of Will Ferrell, Buddy the Elf, in that great movie. It also starred Ed Asner as Santa Claus. Of course, Ed Asner was in the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was kind of the sister show of the Bob Newhart Show, though there was no like cross-pollination as far as episodes were concerned. And James Caan as Walter Hobbs, Will Ferrell's actual dad, Buddy's actual dad. It was a great movie, and I heard that they wanted to do a sequel to it, but Will Ferrell said no. This movie's so good, we don't need to dilute it with a sequel, and I really admire as well. However, Bob Newhart from 2013 to about 2018 guest starred on The Big Bang Theory, and that was the show that finally gave him the Emmy Award he deserves. So, I mean, he should have had more Emmy Awards than that, but he won for Professor Proton, whose real name was Arthur Jeffries, and he was idolized by Sheldon. And so I'm glad he finally got an Emmy Award, and in his 80s of all things. And he continued to quite often post on Facebook. And I remember in 2016, when the Cubs were on the verge of winning the World Series, he says, "Please just win it for me." I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, I'm too old. I don't want to die without the Cubs winning World Series. And sure enough, they won that year. So rest in peace, Robert George Newhart.